Welcome to This Audio is Visual, a podcast dedicated to engaging photographers across the African continent. And today we're honored to be joined by the esteemed award-winning photographer, Mamu Jodi Bieber. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us as we dive into your world and explore your philosophies that shape your work and life. How are you?
I am good, thanks.
Good. In this lovely Friday in Johannesburg. Yeah, so basically we just want to get to know you, Mama Jodi. I've watched your work from afar for far too long, and I thought let me get closer now, find out what all of these beautiful images are about and the person behind them. So to kick it off, I would just like for you to speak a bit about like growing up in South Africa, especially like given the historical context of this country at the time.
Okay, so for me, growing up in South Africa, I was extremely protected by my mom. And I lived in the suburbs, and I went to local schools, government schools. So for most of the time, until the 1976 Soweto uprising, I was very unconscious about what was happening. But even then, we had Betty who worked for us, you know, but I really was naive in what was happening in South Africa. Remember, television only came to us in 1976. But I remember my mom and her friend in 1976, she was living up the road close to Alex. And I overheard them speaking about things that were happening here. And that's when I became aware. And then when I went to high school, I had a history teacher who also made this awareness. And I remember seeing those yellow vans that used to go around looking for people that weren't in the correct area with their passes. And I always thought, that looks so wrong, you know. But I can just say naive to what was going on. And it was really only after school, having traveled, I took a backpack. I first worked, I made 5,000 Rand. And I traveled for 10 months, working in different countries. And I stayed with, I forgot their name, Esme and, activists. And that's really where I woke up to what was happening in South Africa. And photography actually became very important for me. It gave me a vehicle to move into places that maybe I wouldn't have before. And yeah, my 30 years of being a photographer really allowed me to experience in person what other people's lives were in South Africa. That's
interesting. And then in terms of photography itself, like how do you come across it? Like, what was your first camera? How did you get a hold of your first camera? And then I really want to hear your responses. Let's just make sure. Let me just move it for you. Let's clip it with this top so that it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Perfect.
So it was in how I got, you know, growing up in South Africa when I grew up, I don't know about schools now, but you were really academic or you were sporty. And I was definitely more on the sporty side. And very little was given to the arts. And so I didn't know much about it, but I definitely had, like when I went for my 10 months with my backpack traveling around Eastern Turkey, Greece, Egypt, Israel. I went London. My dad gave me he had a Nikon FM. And so that was my diary. I created a visual diary rather than a written diary. But I knew nothing about photography. My pictures were useless. But and also I think by like going to Eastern Turkey and not going where tourists went, but me and this guy, we went to where hardly any tourists had been there. And so I think that sense of exploring or wanting to know a larger world was something that was internal and within me.
That's interesting. And so, in the early stages of your career, what were some of the subjects or themes that sort of interested you the most? What were you drawn to when you started?
Well, you have to understand at the time, a lot of the photography that was coming out was struggle photography in black and white. And I mean, the most important thing for me was to go into the townships and just photograph and be there. That was one thing. But I was also very interested in darkness. Darkness within context to, I spent very early in my career, 6 months with the crime prevention unit in Hillbrow. I spent time in Westbury with the gangs. My first ever campaign was that actually I was still at the Market Photo Workshop and it was December and I was here. And I went to different homeless shelters and I created pictures. And they landed up, I don't know how the Salvation Army saw them. And they used it for a campaign. And so it was, so I suppose I was exploring struggle, but in another way than the usual struggle.
Oftentimes when you would go seek like the alternative story to the struggle, like how do people react to your presence? Like, were they open to telling their stories, sharing their stories with you into their homes?
People, I always say as a photographer, how you present yourself and how you are in the world is what the response is going to be towards you. And see what you just,
you've experienced it.
You can just and people are not victims. If they don't want you there, they don't want you there. But I always had a positive response from people because I think by explaining and asking permission to be where I was, that really opened up many doors for me. So it's how you respond to people.
And over the years, what has kept you motivated as a photographer?
I don't know if you have this feeling, but it's like something inside you is not complete. And something that's, I don't know, out there in the world stares at you. It's something that you feel is taking your attention. And then it's about going out there and creating. And once you've the creating's the difficult part. It's so angst, like crazy. And then once you put it together, it's like a sense of...
So it's like a release of sorts.
It's a release of sorts, but also I think we, in many ways, been so blessed doing what we do because it gives you an opportunity to be out there in the world.
True.
And so I didn't go to university, so it very much was my university, the University of Life, I suppose you can say.
No, I hear you. All the equipment pieces being used to film this video and record the audio is available for rent via @TaveRentals. Follow us on Instagram. We have mics, we have cameras available, and anything that you need that we don't have, we'll outsource for you from a third party. So when you study like the photography industry now, compared to then, like what are the obvious differences, or like what's your view of the state of photography in South Africa right now?
I think they're brilliant photographers, excellent photographers. I think that photography, the state of photography worldwide has shifted completely. I think because maybe of social media, that the response towards photography is very different. So if I wanted to create my Soweto project now, I think it would be more difficult. So I definitely feel it's more tainted and less, it's more considered now. And the fashions are very strong out there. And because of social media, I think like showing someone has become more difficult. So lots of portraits now are with an object in front, or a leaf, or a radio, or I don't know, the beauty of photography in so many respects has been taken away.
Would you say there's a lot of red tape around it now? Like, what's the other word? Like, I don't want to say gatekeeping, but do you feel like there's a lot of red tape around what one can photograph, how they can photograph it, which subject matter is sensitive to which photographer, etc.?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I think it's been spoiled.
No, I hear you. And then in terms of like when you were establishing yourself as a photographer, were there other photographers that you'd often like look at and be like, I find inspiration from this person's work, or were you just building your own world as you moved forward as Jodi?
I was totally, in a way, you know, we didn't have access to the internet like now. So I knew Magnum and Magnum photographers, and of course my love for David Goldblatt's work and Santu Mafaken's work. So South Africans, you know, but my style, I was a street girl because I only did 369 weeks with the market photography workshop. So 9 weeks of everything, and the rest was just learning on the ground. Yeah. And so, which was good, because then you develop your own style.
And speaking about style, your portraits, like when I was doing my research and when I've looked at your work previously, in your frames, there's a lot of stories, narratives. So like the way that you compose your photographs, it's like they're very considered. Like for instance, that one, like there's a lot happening, there's a lot of stories to read, which I really love. Can you maybe speak about that approach to your photography, that style?
Okay. This photograph that was taken at the Orlando swimming pool, believe it or not, was not staged. This was me holding my camera for a very long time.
Waiting, observing.
Yes, remember I'm a Mlungu there. And if you look at that photograph, no one's looking at me there. And this young lady just walked into the frame, and she did that. Maybe she was conscious, but we had no conversation about that. Like, please, would you mind go standing there and pose for me? No, that was different. But in my other portraiture, it's considered. So I use mainly available light, but I always feel that the background is equally important and speaks so much to the person that I'm photographing. And then it's like being a psychologist. It's about, if it takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours, but it's to try and get the person past the camera. So to try and capture something that, when I'm looking through the camera, feels honest. But what's happening in the background is often my choice. So I will come into your home, like you've come here and you've chosen to set up here. That's how I do it. But then I work with the person to try and get them to.
So it's like always a collaborative effort between yourself and
totally. And a lot of my work has a lot of interviews. A hell of a lot of interviews.
So does that then mean that you, before the image is made, you spend time with the people that you photograph?
Well, no, I don't spend time. What I do is that it's maybe I always say to people, can we have about 3 hours? Sometimes it doesn't have to be that. And then with certain projects like Real Beauty, for example, I sat for, half an hour or whatever it took to first interview them with a sound recorder. And then I find people relax when you do that kind of thing, and it also gives you more insight.
True.
And then I photograph.
They're very considered, and you can tell, like, I spent, like, with the portraits in Soweto, there's one, I think it's a daughter and a mom.
Yes.
And at the back, there's, like, these stickers or what.
Yeah, you've got the ANC stickers in that. And also the clothing. If you look at mom and you look at the daughter is like 21st century South African, and the mom is the way the mom and the daughter are standing tells you a whole lot about generational gaps.
Exactly. And also, like, the other interesting picture that I came across, and I was wondering probably how you reacted when you walked into one of the Soweto houses and found Mlungu staying there. There's a portrait, I think it's a couple, I'm not too sure, a family, I can't recall.
Yeah, it's a family. I actually met him at Moponya Mall. Often, because the thing is, when you're creating, right? Well, for me, I break, like with Soweto, the process is like, I have a good understanding of different types of people that are living in Soweto. And when I saw him, I thought that was an important photograph to also take.
Include,
yeah.
In that one frame, which I'm sure you made a whole row of other images, but it gives you sort of like this glimpse into what South Africa really is like a melting pot, different cultures, etc. So I really liked seeing that. Your style combines elements of documentary and commercial photography with a strong aesthetic focus. And even in your house, when we walked in, you can see like a lot of things inside this home are intentional. You maybe speak about your love for aesthetics and how you bring that into your photography.
Yeah, I'm very into aesthetic. So it's not enough it's like, for me, the aesthetic must also draw you in. So I find it when a picture is like not chaotic or whatever, if the chaos is aesthetic, then I can get into the picture. But I really believe in that part, that it's what's in the photograph, the content, and it's the aesthetic. Very important for me. But commercial, I'm not sure.
But I'm going to argue with you on this one. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something that, maybe it's not intentional, but I feel your work could live in a commercial space. So it wasn't even shocking when you had said earlier on that at some point you were working with BKHZ. Because to me, those aesthetics that they kind of represent matches some of the work that you do.
Commercial in terms of galleries, yes. I don't know why I don't think galleries are commercial. I thought you were talking more advertising when you mentioned commercial.
I think even that. I think your work can even live in that space, to be honest.
I've been trying. But I know that the Soweto book has been used extensively in the advertising industry world.
So
I've heard.
So they don't approach you? Can't do that. And like just backtracking a bit to the Soweto project, can we speak a bit about that, like maybe from a technical side? Where did you have an extra light with you? What type of camera were you using? Do you keep it light when you go out to Soweto?
The lighter, the better for me. If I could just use a cell phone, I would. So basically a reflector. And that's it. I've never learned how to use a flash and lighting. Like, I can really manage continuous lighting, but with the assistance. So for me, Soweto was photographed in color. And so I broke it down like early morning, late afternoon would be for exteriors, and in the middle of the day would be more, I love doing portraits inside more than outside because of the intimacy and also because of the soft light. So I'm very like aware of my lighting, but natural lighting. Because when I started with the Nikon FM2, I had no idea how to use the flash. So I could hold my Nikon FM2 at a half a second and shoot. I had to learn to do that.
No tripod, nothing. Just
tripods I used to, yeah, but sometimes I couldn't use a tripod. But tripods, I used to really work with tripods.
So it ended, the Soweto project ended up becoming a book, right?
Yeah.
So I want to speak to, obviously I would assume when one is making a book, the images need to feel like the same story. So I'm wondering like what the editing process was like in post, what were your considerations and stuff like that?
Yeah. So when I edit, it's kind of I know, like I went to the Soweto FM radio station, and she said to me, Soweto is like Hollywood. Everything is here. And I knew that I wanted to shift the brain of people around stereotype. So even when I was photographing, I was editing. So I knew what I was looking for, and I drove those 7,000 kilometers in 3 months looking for it. And so once I got the work, it's very much, I broke it down into sections. Environment, shops, portraits. And then the combination came in, and Rory Bester, he's a friend of mine, but he's also a curator. He helped me lay out the book. And there's a certain structure that if I had to break it down, if the book was in front of me, what I was hoping to achieve by you looking at the book. So it's a very conscious thing. And then juxtaposing things like the woman with the snake is next to
That was crazy.
the Induna. Am I pronouncing it correct?
Yeah,
His photograph of Adam and Eve and the snake and Kaiser Chiefs. So, you know, the combination of those two photographs, even though they weren't shot together and in different places, come together. And I end the book with this photograph because of symbology, of what I was trying in my whole project to say.
You close it off with that image.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So how was the reception once the book was launched and out there?
Well, I had a book launch, which the Goethe Institute helped me have. So from the Goethe, people jumped into a bus, and it was a huge soccer match. So it took people 2 hours to get from Rosebank to Soweto, and there was it was at the Shack. I don't know if the Shack still exists. It's 1 street away from Vilakazi. And we hired out the space, and we had a lekker Sowetan meal, and there was a pool table, and yeah, the response was amazing.
So you showcased the work in Soweto.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful
The
gesture.
book.
Yeah, or the book. That's beautiful, because a lot of the times as photographers we photograph people and we never go back to even giving them a small print.
Yeah.
So like the diligence, or even like going back with the book to show them the end product, is beautiful. So what were the reactions from some of the sitters that you had worked with?
Well, I gave everyone a CD of their photographs. So I think that was I wish I could have given them prints, but there were a lot of people that I photographed. So that was difficult to do. But I think the response was really, really good, because I was also on, for example, the BBC. And it was before the World Cup, and so I spoke about like shifting narrative and, you know, when do you see people with their shopping baskets at Maponya Mall on TV? You don't see normality, you always see the extremities. And so I could use that time, even though I'm not an ambassador, to motivate people to like come to South Africa. Don't be chicken shits and don't believe everything that you see in the media.
Yeah. Exactly, that's so true. And then there's this one portrait of the guy with the dreadlocks, a green car. It's a band basically. It's like one of my like. Your portraits are they're great, but that one stands out for me. So just tell me about that day and the work with those guys.
So it's Nati Low, and the band was called Rebirth. It's now called Atomic, and it's the only thing that really surprised me in Soweto. It's like heavy metal rock, and most of their following was whiteys in Cape Town.
Oh, that's crazy.
But now I watched a video actually recently. He's a biker, and was it in? I think it was in. No, I forget where he lives. So I wanted to kind of make like a record album. So he had the Mini, that little car, and we drove around, and he said, I think this area could be quite nice to photograph. And so I made, shame, poor guys, I made them jump and carry on for like 2 hours. By the end of it, they were exhausted, but they were very happy to have, they loved the photographs.
Action in the pictures, like even the portrait, I don't know if it is part of the Soweto project, but the one by your doorway with the confident boy in the center. Even that moment, like you can tell that you anticipate these moments and you're not just like clicking on the shutter like this, you're looking for something.
No, I'm always looking for something.
It's gorgeous. It's always lovely when you can tell that a photographer's thinking about and considering what they are photographing. And then from reading and listening to your past interviews, it seems like your work is an ode to South Africa. So I'd like for you to speak a bit about this love that you have for South Africa. And you just mentioned now that when you did the Soweto project, you wanted to invite others in the outside to say, hey, this place is beautiful, come. Why do you take it upon yourself?
I'm South African, and for me, this is home. I've lived in London, I've lived in Paris, and it's home, and I really want, like everyone, to have a home and to have work and to have money and no crime, and it's just who I am. I just want that for South Africa.
Does it break your heart where we are right now as a country?
It really breaks my heart because there is money here, and like, how much money do you actually need? I'm not talking about me and you, but when money is being stolen, you know, like, what about the people? You know, let's make it strong, and then you'll still have whatever you want, but at least other people will also have that.
Something, yeah, true.
It's very hard, I think, living here and being blind.
And there's some people that live like under a guise of everything is fine, which I find strange, when like the reality is like totally the opposite of what they say it is. And then like in terms, I think this question sort of ties in with the one that I just asked now, but how do you view your social responsibility as a South African photographer?
I think my responsibility really is firstly to be true to the people that I've photographed, and that if I can shift narrative or shift perspective or actually just be a decent human being. So if someone for example, when I go for a walk in the park here, there are guys living, on the edge. And it's to greet them one-on-one and not think these guys are living in the park, they're scum or whatever. He's busy brushing his teeth. He also wants a normal life. If my work can, have a space to, I don't know, help here. Yeah.
Raise some sort of awareness or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I hear you. And do you have a career highlight that you can share with us, like a moment where you feel like, I can retire now?
You can't retire as a photographer unless maybe you bought a building or you've got a big external income. So, but a big highlight for me was, when I won the World Press Award, Premier Award, that was amazing, and to see Bibi Aisha's life shift. But what it gave to me is 1 year of traveling around the world without my camera and speaking about my work. And I grew so much as a person, presenting myself and not hiding behind a camera. So that was very nourishing. But I also remember being on the boat with diamond divers for a week in Port Nolloth and thinking how alive it was. Like everything was yes, yes, yes. It was just, my pictures weren't even that great because it was difficult, but it was the feeling of it.
What do you think, speaking about your work, has taught you about your work? Because I feel like photographers sometimes don't speak much and we work in isolation. So what lessons did speaking about the work teach you about your work?
I think other people teach me about my work, but what lessons have I think the lessons are more that people have allowed me to learn. So about resilience, it's incredible how people just get on with it regardless of the difficulty. I don't know.
That's more than enough. Resilience is a big one. It is a big one, especially in this country too. And you previously worked in advertising. How has that influenced your photography career?
Yeah. I was a media planner, so I was something completely different, and I just knew that life in Sandton was not my life. That my life was in a direction of getting to know the world through getting to know people, actually, and people in different circumstances to myself or even the same circumstances. And advertising, no, it didn't really influence me.
I always find it interesting when photographers have a background in another career. So I always wonder, is there an overlap?
I should be better marketing orientated because I did study an IMM, marketing management, for 3 years. I'm good with other people. I can advise you.
Why is it always like that?
Exactly.
It's always like that. It's crazy. And business. What business lessons have you found most useful in building a successful photography career?
You know what my business skill was? Being a hard worker and being true and dedicated. So if, for example, Robin Comley, who was at the Star in the very beginning of my career, she said, even if you have to go photograph the shopping basket winner, from Pick and Pay or whatever, you try and create the best shot possible. So I've always identified or seen myself as a hard worker, and then people saw the work, and it would just flow. That's what happened with photography. I just put my mind to it, and also taking chances. So, for example, when 9/11 happened, and I remember living in Troyville, lying on my couch, and thinking South Africa's going to be forgotten now for a while. And I had an exhibition in Perpignan in France. And I thought, I'm going to go live in Paris. And everyone said to me, don't do it. You know, how are you going to make a living? What you're going to do? And I had still, in those days, there were agencies. So I had a French agent as well. And I did it. And then I thought, okay, Paris isn't for me, and I moved to London. And I also did it. So sometimes taking chances also was very helpful for me, and being bullish.
No, I totally agree. Like, comfort doesn't serve anyone. Like, we need to move beyond that in order to get the results that we really want in life.
I mean, that's how I did it. But I think times are very different now. So it's very different now.
And the last question, Mama. Based on your experience, would you then say it's possible to make a sustainable living solely from photography? And of the various income streams in photography, which one has been most fruitful for you over the years?
Okay. I could do it for 99% of my career. And now I have to diversify. Is it diversify?
Yeah, diversify,
Yeah.
You're right.
So I think that in the climate we are in the world, people are not just a photographer. They are a photographer, a podcaster, a this, a that.
Plus.
Plus. So I think that, no, for a few people, it will be possible now. In my, there were many more things. So magazine assignments from international people and NGO assignments is really how I could sustain my life as a photographer. But if you look at magazines now, how many are there?
Few to none.
So that's taken away. And therefore, like, I don't know how the new generation sustains itself.
You've had a retro, is it called a retrospective, like a show where
Mid-career show.
Yeah. So can you make another one, and would you have another one?
I've got tons of work I've got a new project that no one's seen it. So, and tons of work sitting in there that if I had every single day, that I'll just sit there scanning for the rest of my life. So yeah, no, it's definitely room for much more. And the new project.
Yeah, definitely. We want to see the new stuff.
It's very different.
I'd love to see it. There was something else I wanted to ask you. Oh yeah, archiving. So you're speaking about scanning your work, and you think you're going to be doing that for a long time. What's the plan with the archive? Because we're dealing with like hard drives that just go crazy on us. Like, what's the best way for one to salvage and make sure that they have the entire career's worth of work?
You see, what's difficult about this is that if you go into my office and you look what's there it's a lot. So firstly, if I did it myself, it would take forever. And secondly, okay, you have to put it on a lot of hard drives and then store it somewhere safe. What I worry more about, where is it going to be kept? And I'm not talking about safety. Like my friend, I don't like to say it, but in Paris, like his whole archive is already with the French art ministry, or they have an archive where they literally, you edit the work, they're going to scan the work and keep it in this archive. So we don't have that here. And so I'm not so worried about, like, because there's always the negatives, and I've kept everything from press cards to
Everything.
exhibition things to everything. All my books with written stuff in. Where's it going to go? That's more
Your
my
main,
concern. And not only with me, with many other photographers. Because I don't think value is placed on that in South Africa.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, the archive is a big question for a lot of people. So I'm with you there. But thank you so much for sitting down with me and welcoming us into your beautiful home. You've inspired a lot of us, and thank you very much. I'm giving you your flowers.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Smell them while you're still alive, Mama.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.